Hi everyone, welcome back on our recorded lectures. And in this video lecture, we'll be discussing the admissibility of photographic evidence in court. This is important for you to know since our course deals with forensic photography. So, one of our primary duty is to ensure that the photographs that we are preparing are admissible in court. Here are our lesson objectives. You should be able to determine what is a photographic evidence and to determine and to know the requisites for the admissibility of evidence. Before we proceed in defining a photographic evidence, let's deal with the very basic definition of evidence. Okay, according to the rules of court, specifically Section 1 of Rule 128, this is actually it provides the general provisions on evidence, and evidence is defined as the means sanctioned by the rules of ascertaining in a judicial proceeding the truth respecting a matter of fact. Ibig sabihin, evidence could be any material, okay, which is permitted in court, which is sanctioned or admitted in court. Okay, it should conform to the provisions of the rules of court. And that material or that means is used in ascertaining in a certain judicial proceeding in trial. In simple terms, the truth respecting a matter of fact. And in criminal cases, we must overcome um the guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So, in order to establish the guilt of an accused beyond reasonable doubt, we must have a um proof, okay? And the proof must be sufficient for us to establish the guilt of the accused. And how are we going to do that? That is with the use of the evidence that we have. Specifically, in criminal case, okay, the prosecution has the burden of proof in proving the guilt of the accused. So, the evidence to be presented by the prosecutor must have a significant weight in order to prove the guilt of our accused. Okay, since we already established the definition of evidence and you've said that evidence is a means in ascertaining the truth respecting a matter of fact in a judicial proceeding, that evidence must be sanctioned by the court and it must be admissible by the court. There are two inherent requirements in the admissibility of evidence. That is the Section 3 of Rule 128 and Section 4 of Rule 128. It talks about how can an evidence be deemed admissible? And there are two requirements. An evidence will become admissible in court if it is relevant and if it is competent. When we say relevant or the relevancy of evidence of that material, it must have such relation to the fact in issue. May kinalaman dapat sa nililitis sa korte. So for example, in the information or in the complaint, it was alleged that Pedro killed Maria using a gun and he killed Maria by shooting Maria on her forehead. Then, okay, that is the issue in court. Okay, whether or not guilty si Pedro. Okay? So, the evidence or material that must be presented should be related to what is being asked in court. Okay? So, yan. So, that would talk about the relevancy of an specific evidence. Next, okay, requirement for an evidence to be admissible is that hindi lang sapat na relevant siya sa kaso. Dapat, which is important also, is that the evidence should be should be competent. Okay? Ibig sabihin, it is not excluded by the rules of the court. Meaning that evidence, okay, is not a fruit of the poisonous tree. That evidence should not be illegally obtained for it to be competent. Because in our law, okay, an evidence that is illegally obtained is deemed inadmissible in court. It is considered as the fruit of the poisonous tree following that doctrine. Okay, so if you remember the exclusionary rules that you've discussed in CDI 1, dapat ang ebidensya is legally obtained for it to be competent. So these two, okay, is important before an evidence should be admitted in court. An evidence must be competent and an evidence must be relevant. By the way, this section serves as the heart of evidence. It applies to any kind of evidence. Okay, another requirement for an evidence to be admitted, this is actually a procedural requirement, and that is the proof of authentication. Okay, so as to pictures, photographs, maps, diagrams, the authenticity, okay, is proved through the testimony of the photographer or anyone who is familiar with the persons, things, places shown in that particular picture, photograph, map, or diagram. So, ibig sabihin, you, as a forensic photographer, if you will testify in court, okay, you will be the one who will authenticate it. Okay? Yan, ma-overcome yung suspicion in terms of the authenticity of the pictures, photographs, maps, or diagrams if you will testify in court that you are the one who took it, you have personal knowledge about that picture, photographs, maps, and diagrams for it to be admissible. Kailangan na siguraduhin ng korte that the evidence that is presented is not tampered. Okay? It must be genuine. Ayan. So, when we say authenticity, authenticity refers to the proving the accuracy of the things, persons, okay, or places depicted in the photograph. Okay, the photographer, the one who took the photograph, must be the one to prove that the pictures, ayan, persons, places, okay, that is shown in that particular documents are accurate and are genuine. So in terms of tape recordings naman, okay, the proof of authentication lies on the person who recorded, okay, that certain recording. Okay, and this person, okay, should be the one to present in court in order for him to lay the foundation, okay, before the tape recording would be admitted in court. So there are certain requisites actually. So here are the following requirements before a tape recording is deemed admissible and be given probative value in court. And when we say probative value, it means the extent to which the evidence could rationally affect the assessment of the probability of the existence of a fact in issue. Ibig sabihin lang yan in simple terms, okay, it must have something to do to the fact in issue. It is related. Okay, it is given value with regards to the fact that is in issue that you are trying to resolve during trial, court trial. So here are the requisites. First, it must shows that the one who recorded was capable of taking testimony. And before a person would be qualified to testify, there are certain qualifications of a witness, okay, in accordance with the rules on evidence. I will just give you a glimpse of the qualification. A witness, okay, must before a witness would be permitted to testify, a witness must be able to see, recollect, and be able to narrate or report the fact about which they are called to testify. Okay, they are capable of relaying what they have perceived. Ayan. Before they will be called to testify in court. In short, the person who will testify, okay, in this case, the person would be the one who recorded the tape, okay, should be competent. Okay, next, okay, showing that the operator of the device was competent. Ayan. Another requisite is that establish the authenticity and correctness of the recording. So how will the person who took the tape recording will establish its authenticity or accuracy? Okay, the person who will be called to testify must know the principles on how he came up with such recording, ayan, and how accurate it is. And also, okay, the person who took the tape must prove that changes, alterations, or deletions in the tape recording has not have not been made. Ayan. So if nagkaroon lang ng certain editing because the crime scene is gruesome, ayan, madugo, black and white niya lang, he should be able to explain it in court, and dapat ma-justify niya why did he do that. Okay? Another, he must have a enough knowledge, okay, in showing the manner on how did the person who took the who recorded, how did the person preserved the recording. Paano ba yun? Meron bang chain of custody na nangyari? Nagkaroon ba, nilagyan ba niya ng digital signature before preserving the recording? Ayan. Did he saved it in a certain storage device? And what is it? Ayan. Dapat ma-prove niya yung process on how did he preserve in order to prove that the evidence or the tape recording is not altered, okay, or tampered. Another is that identification of speakers. He must be aware, since siya ngayon nag-record, dapat alam niya kung sino yung nagsasalita during that time or sino yung present, for example. And also, it must the recorder must show that the testimony elicited was voluntarily made without any kind of inducement. Okay, in cases that we're dealing with electronic evidence, any photograph, yan, video, okay, electronic evidence yan, okay, which is produced by means of an electronic device that is under the rules on electronic evidence. So, with regards to the proof of authentication, the same lang rin sa binanggit natin kanina. Okay? So, any audio, photograph, video evidence of events, acts, or certain transactions shall be admitted in court, okay, by showing, presenting, or displaying it in the court. And it should be identified, explained, and authenticated again by the person who made the recording, the photographer or the videographer, perhaps, and or by some other person competent to testify on the accuracy thereof. Okay, for example, it requires special knowledge actually. So the court may summon an expert witness who would testify that tape recording is not edited. Okay? Perhaps a videographer, a Photoshop expert, or yung mga expert in determining a certain video that is tampered, mga ganyan. Okay? So, yan. Okay, what is photographic evidence? Ano nga ba ang photographic evidence? A photograph, okay, may serve as, first, it could either be a documentary evidence or a real evidence. A photograph is deemed as a documentary or real evidence depending on the purpose, okay, for which it is offered. Bakit mo ba ino-offer yung particular photograph na yan? Okay? So, if the purpose is to prove the existence of such photograph, okay, or the condition of that photograph, then that photograph is considered as a real evidence. For example, okay, in a case of concubinage, just in order to prove na nag-exist ang marriage picture, okay, photograph ng mag-asawa na yan, pinakita niya yung picture na nag-exist pa siya, hindi sinunog nung, for example, nung asawa, yung photograph na yan. So, you are proving the existence of that photograph, then that photograph is offered, okay, as a real evidence. Okay? Ayan. A photograph is also deemed as a real evidence if the subject or the inquiry deals with the age of the photograph, the signatures thereon, the physical features or conditions, okay, that is deemed as real or object evidence. Now, how come na yung isang photograph, okay, will be offered as documentary evidence? A photograph could be offered or will be offered as a documentary evidence if the one that you are proving is its contents. Okay? Kung pinoprove mo na yung sa picture, yung nasa picture is the persons in the picture is the kabit and yung asawa ng nagdedemanda, then that will be entered now as a documentary evidence. Okay? So again, if a certain document is presented to prove its content, kung ano yung nilalaman ng document na yan, ng photograph na yan, ng digital image na yan, ng screenshot na yan, kung yung content yung pinuprove sa korte, then that would be offered as a documentary evidence. So according to the revised rules on evidence which took effect last May 1, 2020, yan, recordings, photographs, or other materials that contains sounds may be considered as a documentary evidence if it is offered as proof of their contents. Ayan. So again, photographs considered as documentary evidence also includes still pictures, ayan, drawings also, ayan, photograph of a drawing ng isang ng ina-allege mo, okay, and stored images perhaps in his or her smartphones. X-ray films also are considered documentary evidence, motion pictures and videos if it is offered as proof of their contents. So if that's the case, okay, if we are dealing with documentary evidence, yung photograph na yan, yung recording na yan, if we qualified it as a documentary evidence already, then best evidence rule would be applied. Okay, so dati, on the rules on evidence, that is what we call best evidence rule. But on the revised rule on evidence, that became now an original rule. Okay? So, ano ba yung original rule na yan or best evidence rule na yan? So, that best evidence rule or original rule says that, okay, the best evidence is considered the original. Okay? Ayan. So, ibig sabihin, according to the revised rules on evidence, duplicates are also considered an original document. At ano nga ba ang duplicate? A duplicate is defined as a counterpart produced by the same impression as the original or from the same matrix or by means of photography, including enlargement of the original document or miniatures of that original document or by mechanical, okay, nag-undergo siya ng chemical processing, okay, or electronic re-recording, ayan, or by chemical reproduction, or by other equivalent process or technique that accurately reproduce the original, then according to the revised rules on evidence, that also is an original document, and if that is the case, okay, that is considered as a best evidence. Okay, under the original rule. So, gagamitin na natin yung bagong term ng best evidence rule ngayon, that is the original rule. So, if a duplicate is considered as a original document, for example, yung photograph ni Juan at Maria, okay, photocopy. Okay? So, that could be a form of a duplicate. And this is as good as the original. Okay? So, yan. So, provided that that duplicate accurately represents the original. So, dapat colored yan. Okay? Ayan. Now, question. Okay, is a photocopy then as good as the original? Sabi nga ng revised rules on evidence, yes. Okay? So, based on the expanded definition of an original document under the revised rules on evidence, it would appear that a photocopy may now be admissible as a duplicate. Therefore, okay, photocopies are no longer treated as a secondary evidence. Okay, it is treated as a primary evidence, which in court, primary evidence will be given more weight as compared to the secondary evidence. So given that a photocopy of document is a counterpart, an accurate counterpart produced by photography or any technique that accurately reproduces the original, it falls within the definition already of a duplicate, and thus this is as good as original. So, when we say photocopy, okay, this is the definition of a photocopy. A photocopy is a photographic copy of a printed or written material produced by the process involving the action of light on a specifically prepared surface. Okay, so, ginamitan siya ng photocopy machine. Ayan. So, that could be as good as duplicate. O kaya naman, if you are dealing with digital images, okay, you could also duplicate that. Ayan. So, under section 4, paragraph C, okay, of Rule 130 of the revised rules on evidence, a duplicate is as admissible as the original, sabi nga. However, the admissibility of duplicates as an original is limited. So, may limitation pala. Hindi lahat ng duplicate, hindi lahat ng photocopy could be admissible agad-agad. There is certain exception. Again, in every general rule, there is an exception. General rule, sabi natin kanina, is that a duplicate is as good as original. However, there is an exception. The exception is that this could be inadmissible if, okay, a genuine question is raised on the authenticity of the original. Or, second, in the circumstances, it is unjust or inequitable to admit the duplicate in lieu of the original. So, first exception is that here, okay, a genuine question is raised on the authenticity of the original. So, meron kang original document at meron ding duplicate. For example, photocopy of a marriage contract. Yun yung duplicate, di ba? Ngayon, if the original is its authenticity is in question, then it may not be, okay, the duplicate may not be admissible in court kasi nga in question yung original. Okay? Second exception is that if there is unjust or inequitable to admit that admit the duplicate in lieu of the original. So, now, ngayon, may original ka na nga, tapos ino-offer mo pa si duplicate. Siyempre, i-prefer yung original pa rin. Okay? Kasi nga, in existence naman pala, nasa sayo naman pala yung original document na yan. Okay? So that's it. So the admissibility actually of a photocopy or of a duplicate may still be questioned by the opposing party. So in court trial, the power of a physical evidence is considered of the highest order because this physical evidence, specifically the photograph, speaks more eloquently than 100 witnesses. Kahit nasabihin ng 100 tao or 1,000 na tao na yung nasa photograph na yan ay hindi baril, kung kitang-kita dun sa physical evidence, dun sa photograph that this is clearly a gun, then, okay, papanigan pa rin yung physical evidence. And again, when we say physical evidence, this refers to any evidence which is addressed to the senses of the court. So again, the power of a physical evidence. So if when testimonies conflict, okay, there is a conflict of testimony of the part of the accused and the part of the prosecution, then therefore the part of the defense and the part of the prosecution, the physical evidence is important in the determination of the truth. Okay, so that's it. So remember the requirements. Okay, before a photograph is admissible in court, this is important for you before you will have your mock court presentation.